help, this seminar series would not have gotten off the ground. It's a very ambitious project with almost 10 seminars once a week and all over from guests from all over the world. So I'm very glad to introduce today's speaker, my good friend and colleague, Dr. Professor Juergen Scheffran from the University of Hamburg. Juergen and I actually co-chair the International Network of Engineers and Scientists for Global Responsibility, with a short acronym of INES, I-N-E-S. And you can find some information about our work at inesglobal.net. So Juergen and I are the co-chairs. It's a very small organization of scientists trying to bring analysis and clarifying issues about science and politics, besides the technical part, like the work that's done by Professor Scheffran. Juergen is currently a professor in the Institute of Geography at the University of Hamburg in Germany. Um, he's also the head of the research group called Climate Change and Security, which is located in the Cluster of Excellence for the Earth System Research and Sustainability, called the CLICS, CLICCS. And CLICS's work is really far-ranging, looking at climate futures, what are possible and what are plausible in what is going on, what future. Um, he also held previously positions at the University of Marburg in Germany, a Technical University of Darmstadt, Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, and at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign here in the United States, where he has spent quite a bit of time in research and teaching. His research fields include climate security, which is the topic today, environmental conflict and migration, complexity and sustainability. And apart from his work on climate change, the work where my work and his work dovetail are is in the area of technology assessment and arms control in missiles, missile defenses, space, and nuclear weapons. And Juergen has done a lot of work in that, and we are currently working on that on a report on space and missile defense arms control. He is, as I said, the co-chair with me. And finally, Professor Scheffran has a PhD in physics from the University of Marburg. So without further ado, Juergen, over to you.
Thank you, Subrata, for this kind introduction. It's really a pleasure to speak in your seminar on this a remarkable day, I must say. We'll see what the outcome will be in the end. And I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Can you hear me? Okay. So thanks to Subrata, Patricia, and others for organizing this seminar series. And I want to open my presentation. I'm sharing this with you. I hope you can see it. And so I'm talking about climate change and international security. So an issue that's increasingly becoming relevant with growing climate change, affecting the international security landscape, and maybe also becoming a future conflict issue when climate change is destabilizing many parts of the world. So the connection between energy, climate, and conflict is shown in this graph, starting with fossil energy as a main emitter for CO2 emissions, which are accumulating in the atmosphere, increasing the concentration of CO2 through the greenhouse effect, affecting the global mean temperature, which is important for the climate zones and the distribution of natural resources, which are important for human security and also for societal stability It looks like a long impact chain, and the question is how strong the linkages are and how they might be affected in the future to cut these impact chain. Now, fossil energy is a major driver. Fossil energy is being used since 200 to 300 years, since coal was discovered and used in Great Britain as part of the Industrial Revolution. Then later oil and natural gas were being used. Question is how long this fossil peak will last over the thousands of years. Will it be again 200 to 300 years, or will it end sometime within the century with the oil and natural gas being reduced in their availability? And this fossil peak is translated into temperature peak. We had, of course, natural variation of the climate, particularly between the ice ages, and 10,000 years ago was the end of the last ice age. And since then we are in a warmer period. And because of the release of the fossil energy sources, we experience currently a strong increase of temperature, which may last hundreds of years and is shifting and changing the global climate if you cannot stop it. You see the curve here, the brown curve is the increasing emissions of fossil energy from fossil energy sources. It's been significantly increasing to more than 30,000 million tons of CO2 in the world. And as a result, the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere is increasing from about 280 parts per million to more than 400 parts per million, and will further increase in the future, as you see. This graph shows basically the change of the average temperature between the period 1881 to 2017. And blue means it was cooler than the average in this period, and red that it was warmer than the average in this period. And you see the accumulation of warm years in recent times, an indicator of global warming. For the future, there are projections from the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. Basically, you see the possible extreme scenarios. In the better case, it maybe stabilize the temperature at 1.5 degrees by end of the century, and in the worst case, to 4 degrees. And this is the range of possibilities we can still influence. 4 degrees is more than we experienced in terms of warming over the last tens of thousands of years. As a result of the warming, which is the horizontal axis, you see that there are several implications and impacts, in particular on food. Initially, it may be possible that because of the higher carbon concentration, there may be increasing crop yields, but in the long run, the crop yields may be declining because of the distribution of water and temperature and rainfall. Water availability is likely declining in regions which are already dry, such as Mediterranean region or Southern Africa. And the water from the oceans also has an effect through sea level rise on the coastal regions. Ecosystems are under stress. All ecosystems have a certain adaptation rate, but the climatic changes are faster than the natural adaptation rate of ecosystems, and many species which may be substantially declining in addition to the biodiversity losses that we currently experience. The next category is extreme weather events because of more energy in the global climate system. There may be more water in the atmosphere, but also more stronger storms, forest fires, droughts, flooding, and heat waves. And below, finally, you have the possibility of abrupt and major irreversible changes triggered by tipping elements in the climate system because of nonlinear dangerous feedbacks. So the different effects are spelled out differently in each part of the world. As I mentioned, the Mediterranean region may experience more droughts, as well as Southern Africa and Central Asia, and also parts of North America. And you also see in other parts of the world strong flooding and storms, in Southern Asia, particularly Eastern Asia, Central America. This is putting stress on ecosystems like Amazon forest and other forests in the world, including those in the northern polar region, which puts stress on the ecosystems there, symbolized by the polar bear here. We have also the possible harvest losses because of declining crop yield, including again North America is the maize corn is possibly under stress in the future. But in other parts of the world, in China, for instance, could be putting stress on the harvest and the crops, putting stress also on the farmers and herders. We have the possibility of nonlinear effects because of the glacier melting, the methane that is released in large areas of Siberia or Canada because of the warming. That's a very aggressive greenhouse gas. The glacier retreat is also one of the causes of sea level rise, in addition to the ocean expansion. So all parts of the world are affected quite differently, but severely, in particular also coastal regions. Now, what you can observe is has been an increase in natural disasters, according to the Munich Re insurance company that's counting the severe events, and you see that the disasters have been increasing from about 250 in 1980 to more than 800 in 2019. And this includes both hydrological events like floods, as well as meteorological events like storms, and climatological events like droughts. The United States is particularly vulnerable to climatic change. It's because of the high emissions. It's also one of the drivers of climatic change, but it's also vulnerable to very strong storms from the coastal region, in particular the Gulf region. You all may remember the Hurricane Katrina that was devastating the city of New Orleans, but also the eastern coast is very vulnerable. You saw that the Hurricane Sandy in 2012 went very far north and destroyed part of New York. Was a very expensive disaster, $20 billion toll on the city. United States also sensitive and vulnerable to drought in the Midwestern region and in the western part, from Illinois to California, and affecting the harvest areas. And finally, other small-scale storms like tornadoes and also wildfires, as we experienced in recent year. In California, you see below that the red image, the red sky in San Francisco area. There were so many wildfires, it was also almost impossible to count them or turn them down. But this is not only the United States. In fact, Australia had a record season in the last winter term, summer term in Australia, killing more than 1 billion animals. So there's an annual climate risk index by the organization German Watch that's just counting the number of events and their impact on human life and also on economic cost. And they make a ranking for each year and also for the last 20 years. And you see the ranking for 2018 included not only southern countries like India or parts of Africa, Latin America, and Asia, but also for the first time where it had severe impacts also on Western countries like Germany, France, United States, and Canada, partly because of the severe drought and the hot time period there. So in the same year, 2018, there was an influential article published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Science in the United States, just making the case that in the international climate system, there are many tipping elements that could aggravate beyond a certain threshold. It aggravates the situation. I mentioned already the permafrost and the methane, possible outburst. Also, the Arctic winter ice in the polar region is melting, which means less reflection of sunlight and more absorption of heat in the ocean. The dying of boreal forest, of rainforests, the thermal hairline circulation in the North Atlantic could break down at some point, and also the Antarctic ice sheets So these are various elements that could lead to a cascading events and possibly drive the climate into a new phase, the so-called hothouse Earth, which is replacing the previous glacial and interglacial cycles. So we could enter a new phase of the climate system, which actually occurred millions of years ago, but not humans experience this hothouse times. So we don't know how humanity can survive under these conditions. Now the question is, how is climate change affecting human responses? And there are two different types of responses possible. One is the crisis pathway, which is given in red color. It means more security risk, more instabilities, human displacement, and migration movements and conflicts. But it's also possible that climate change is triggering solutions and alternative responses for risk avoidance, adaptation, stabilization, and also conflict resolution and sustainability. So both pathways are actually competing these days, and it depends on political action, which pathway is actually succeeding this action window. Looking at the crisis pathway, it has been discussed since 2007 in particular, that climate change is becoming a security threat, threatening human existence and also possible armed conflict, as has been suggested in a study by American generals and former admirals, calling climate change a threat multiplier that could lead to more violence. In Germany, in the same year, there was a report, Climate Change as a Security Risk, arguing that conflict may further spread across regions as a result of climate change if climate policy fails. And more recently, a study by Michael Clare, a book that was looking at how the Pentagon is responding to climate change, that they see more possible military responses in terms of in response to natural disasters, and also armed conflict driven by climate change. So there's a lot of scientific analysis in this field now, trying to understand the climate conflict interaction and looking basically at the two-way linkage. One is the link from warming as a result of increasing solar absorption and affecting natural resources such as soils, which are very important, soil water for agriculture. And then because of a decline of the situation, this could trigger conflict or even aggravate increasing conflict. In the other direction, it's possible that conflict then undermines agricultural production and the protection of natural resources such as soil, and make the solution of the climate problem more difficult. So you have a possible two-way aggravation. This is at least the theoretical conception that's being discussed. There have been a number of studies actually looking at this empirical linkage between climate and conflict going far back in history, but also more recent times. Some publications like a book we did, and also a article in Science that was looking at the past data studies that were coming to the result that most of the studies actually found an empirical link between climate and conflict. 27 studies and 16 of 27 found a link, and 6 found no link, and 5 an ambiguous relationship between climate and conflict. And it's very often the long-term historical studies that find that, and more recent studies were less conclusive, in particular in industrialized countries. There was less armed conflict than in developing countries. And local violence is often more likely than the big climate wars that are often projected. It's still possible to deal with the problem, to reduce vulnerability to climate change, better adaptive capacity and human development, driving the situation from conflict to cooperation. Cooperation is much less studied in the literature. You see also on the right-hand side other studies, more recent studies, but the results are not so different, comparing the studies that about 50% find a significant link of the studies, 1/4 mixed results, and 1/4 no significant results. So it's a kind of dominance of the studies that find a significant link. And when you look actually at the real data, you see that there was a maximum of the armed conflict in the world around 1990. After from World War II, 1946 till 1990 was a gradual rise of the armed conflict. Then after the end, end of the Cold War, there was a drop in armed conflict. And in recent years, since about 2011 or 12, again, a steep rise of armed conflicts. And this is now a pretty stable pattern that we experience. It's even higher than the maximum we had during Cold War times. Mostly the conflicts in Africa and in Asian countries. Now the linkage has been summarized in a comprehensive study that was published in Nature last year, looking at the, theoretically looking at the link between conflict risk and climate risk. Could be aggravating each other, but also an efficient climate policy could bring it down, this linkage. And this is the task and the challenge for governments to bring this linkage down, but also for groups in society in better adaptation and mitigation strategies. And the experts who took part in this study, led by Stanford University, came up to the conclusion that there is a certain probability for a substantial increase of armed conflict risk. And according to the expert, there was some increase in the past of about 5% for the increasing temperature by 2 degrees to 13%, and for 4 degrees temperature rise by on average 26%. Each circle represents an expert opinion, and you see the strong variation among the experts, which is still there about this. But I still think it's a remarkable result that the average is significant, about 1/4 increase of the conflict risk. Now, one aspect that was increasingly studied, what are the possible linkages between climate change and armed conflict and destabilization of society? Food production is a very important factor affected by climate change. Freshwater decline, storm and flood disasters, and migration could increase as a result of climate change and become a conflict factor. Now, on this map, you see again a regional distribution of conflict risk and security risk associated with climate change. And you see the different drivers could be droughts or recurrent flooding or ecosystem change, extreme weather event and loss of coastal areas, which could then lead to become a conflict factor in the Sahel zone, for instance, in terms of water scarcity and land problems, land use problems, and in South Asia because of the flooding, but in other parts of the world as well. This is driving some changes like migration flows given by the arrows or desertification. And now the question is, I want to go only through some of these regions, and the Arctic region is a possible future conflict region, which is at the intersection of major powers. United States, Canada, Russia, and European countries are sharing the Arctic region, and there is a conflict on the boundaries of the Arctic region because there are lots of resources, in particular fossil fuel resources, oil and natural gas, and there is a competition because of the melting of the ice. These resources become better accessible. Also, the Arctic Ocean becomes better accessible also for transportation of shipping. And so this could become a driver of major power competition. And actually last year at the Arctic conference, the American Secretary of State, Pompeo, attacked Russia and China because of their big power interests in this region, neglecting them, their own interests in this region. So we will see how far this conflict will go and whether the tensions can be controlled in some way. Another region in Africa has many possible conflicts already. And we did a field research in northwest Kenya, which is a conflict-rich region around the Turkana Lake. And we made interviews with people living there about their perception of climate change as a conflict factor, but also what energy plays a role here, because they found oil in this region, and they have the biggest wind power station. The question is really how this energy use is, whether it's contributing to development or is becoming a conflict factor itself. Then a famous example that has been used is the Arab Spring and whether climate change was a conflict factor there. There are many publications on this subject, simply because before the Arab Spring, there was severe fluctuations in the global food price index. You see a maximum was reached around 2008 on the lower left, and also in the year 2010-11, a strong increase in the food price, and at the maximum of the food price, there were many conflicts in affected regions, in particular Northern Africa, which is one of the biggest food importers, and also the poor people depend on the price of food and protested in the beginning, bread protests. And the question is, of course, what is behind the food price changes? Yeah, there is certainly a link to the oil price. There's a link to the land use speculations worldwide for food and energy, particular bioenergy. But there were also natural disasters in the year 2010 that increased the scarcity for food in China and Russia and other countries as main exporters of crops. So there was some speculation that climate change was a driver, but even that is also contested. It's hard to say what the percentage of climate change in this regard is. You know, all the result of the Arab Spring is that the instability and some of the autocratic regimes fell in Tunisia, in Libya, and Egypt. Almost also in Syria, the Assad regime was severely under pressure as a result of the protests that emerged. And also for Syria was a discussion whether the severe drought that occurred in 2008, so shortly before the civil war in Syria emerged, could have been a driver because many farmers lost their land in this drought. And the Assad regime was completely unable to deal with this situation. So now again, you can speculate how big is the effect of climate change. Again, this is contested because as many say it's the social and political and economic conditions in Syria are more relevant. And but climate change is one among many factors here. The refugee crisis in 2015, another crisis which triggered many other crises, and it's connected to the Syrian crisis and the Arab Spring in certain ways, was one of the factors that started instability in Europe, because some countries objected the refugees and tried to build walls and fences. And this triggered the debate on climate-induced migration, whether climate change could have been a factor here. Actually, about 25 million forced displacements occurred last year by natural disasters and 8.5 million by violent conflict. And the refugees doubled since 2005 in the world. So the alarmist perception assumes there will be hundreds of millions of climate refugees coming in the future, up to 1 billion, but other scientists are more cautious, saying not everybody is affected by climate change will become a displaced person. And it's still possible to try to keep migration under control by also helping people who are affected by climate change and strengthening their adaptive capacities. Now, all these different things are interacting with each other. That's my main message. We experience an increasing complexity in the world of many problem areas, which are shown around here, from climate change to resource scarcity to loss of infrastructures, economic and financial crisis, the threats to human security and social stability, refugees and violent conflict. They are all interconnected with each other through many connecting factors. I think globalization is probably one of the most important connecting factor of the crisis we experience, in addition to climate change and the resource linkages and the now also we see diseases and infections becoming connecting factors, and the media and social networks, transportation channels, and markets, financial markets. This is, I think the current politics is probably not able yet to deal with this complexity because it's compartmentalized. Now we see waves coming of crisis. We are in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, and I think hand washing alone is not enough, or the mask alone. We need other measures, and we see that as a result of the economic responses, we may experience a growing recession as the second wave that may come. And behind that wave, there is also the wave, crisis wave of climate change, and even a bigger wave of loss of ecosystems and biodiversity. So I think we need to be better prepared to deal with these crises and avoid the root causes of them. Now, dealing with the root causes, I think we should avoid moving further on this red crisis pathway here, and move as early as possible on the transformation pathway, the green pathway, that is shown here through an appropriate climate policy and other policy fields. But the further we move down on the crisis pathway, the more difficult it is becoming to move upwards on the transformation pathway. So I think it's time for change, hopefully for the better. And there are many different options actually available if there's political will to do it. And we can replace the fossil energies by sustainable energy sources, in particular renewable energy. We can avoid CO2 emissions by mitigation strategies. Increasingly, there's discussions about climate engineering to extract carbon from the atmosphere, or avoid or increase the solar radiation into outer space. Again, this is a very contested field because we cannot hope that climate engineers can save our planet. And this is more still in the scientific community than in the political domain. But in adaptation, if climate change occurs, there's a lot of work going on in this field, what to do, and conflict resolution and cooperation strategies to deal with the human security and societal conflicts. Okay, but in principle, there is a range of policies that can be taken, and now the question is, who is taking this? And Germany has taken some initiatives, and in regards to climate security, there was conferences in 2019 and 2020 by the German Foreign Ministry to convince the UN Security Council to tackle climate change risks. And there are many movements now in Germany, Europe, and all over the world, just to mention Fridays for Future and related organizations like Scientists for Future, trying to trigger the transformation. Many initiatives occur now also calling for a climate emergency on the national level, like the British Parliament has declared this, and many communities and cities are joining this activity. And of course, there is the Paris Agreement agreed on by nation states, together with non-governmental organizations, which call for stringent measures for 1.5 degree temperature limit or 2 degree. Now, where are we now with climate policy? You see that depends on how far the emissions go up. This is the business as usual pathway, going up to from 40 to more than 100 gigatons of CO2 emissions. That would be leading into a disaster world of more than 5 degree temperature change with all the associated impacts. The current obligations taken by nations would lead to a 3 degree world, which is the middle pathway where we are currently, if not more is happening. But the goal is to bring it down, bring the emissions down to 0. This is the main challenge, and to limit temperature to 2 degrees or even lower, to also avoid the disaster risks. So this is the challenge for the next coming decades, bring the still increasing worldwide emissions down to 0 by mid of this century. This is a degree. It requires every nation to take part in this, to limit the total emissions to about 750 billion tons of CO2. How can we do it? There are many ways and ideas, social, technological, economical, to bring down the emissions. And there are at least 4 factors that are very important. One is the total population is an important factor. There is a demographic transition, so population growth will probably be limited within this century to 10 to 11 billion people. The red factor is the wealth per person, W divided by P, which is a function of investment in the economy to make people happy, maybe with less production and consumption. But we still experience a growth in this factor as well as in population, because there is many people want to have a development. Then energy intensity is a factor, energy divided per growth unit. And we can basically save energy in many different ways, also by lifestyle changes. And maybe the most important factor for now is the emission intensity, emissions per energy unit. We can move away from fossil to low carbon energy sources. This is maybe the only factor which can be really zero and bring down emissions to zero. The other relationship that's important is that between energy input on the left side and the human needs on the right-hand side, and the linkage factors in between, like the distribution of energy, how much are we consuming, how we are distributing this in the society through markets and political decision-making, and what is the utility of each energy unit and what is the risk of each energy unit. And in the end, humans should be happy with the energy they have. And there are different strategies like conservation, saves the energy source, equity strategy makes a fair and just distribution of energy. We can have cooperation and negotiation, and efficiency improvement and risk reduction to have a sufficiently satisfying life in the end. So there are many ideas and many possibilities to bring emissions down and also make people happy with the existing energy sources. Technologically, we can move away from the fossil energy pathway, which we currently have, reduce it and replace it by low carbon energy sources, by renewable energy, and by efficiency improvements. And these things are actually happening. So we are in the middle of this transition, and some countries have actually obligations, like the European Union with its Green New Deal, or China has also declared to move into a low carbon, zero carbon society. Economy can help when the price of renewable energy sources is declining. The more we use it, the cheaper it becomes. And then it becomes cheaper than the price of and the cost of the existing sources, the conventional fossil sources. With wind energy, we are already in this range. With photovoltaics, we may move into this range at a later stage. Biomass is somewhere on the edge. So with increasing use, you can expect a rise of wind and hydro and solar in the future. And the projections actually say that. If it's not prevented by politics, we can actually see a steeply rising solar energy use in the future. So this gives some hope. If politics is not preventing it. And there are ideas to do it at a large scale across continents, like the idea of the desert tech concept, connect the renewable energy in Europe, Middle East, and Northern Africa, which is a very sunny region with a lot of solar energy input, but it requires investments into a power grid of hundreds of billions of US dollars. But currently we have the instability preventing it in this region. Germany has been trying to become a driver in this process, on the one hand side by replacing nuclear and fossil energy sources and switching more and more to renewables, wind and solar. In particular, these are just the recent numbers to see how strong the rise has been there. And it's not free of problems because some people, most Germans actually support the energy transition, others don't want wind power stations near their house. So there's some discussion and competition and protest movement in society. And in the end, the question is what politics and economic actors like businesses are supporting this process. Just showing you some numbers again for Germany as an example. You see since 1990, which was 100% of gross domestic product has been increasing, but at the same time, the primary energy consumption has been declining in Germany, despite this strong rise. And the greenhouse gas emissions have been even stronger, declining than the energy consumption. So this is possible. There was also a decision last year by the German government in response to the protest movement suggesting a carbon price, which is the curve below, very much below. According to experts, this is still not enough. Carbon price is suggested. They suggest a carbon price of at least 100 euros per ton of CO2. So, but the direction is, I think, is okay. Maybe not the speed of change. Now, many studies suggest a great transformation, ranging from Mikhail Gorbachev to the Pope with his study, and scientists, the Club of Rome, came up with a 50-year report by led by Ernst Ulrich von Weizsäcker and others. That is indeed possible, and there are many good examples how the transition can be made. And you see some other studies by the German Advisory Council report, and New Climate for Peace is indeed within the range if we want it. So coming to the end, I think we are facing a double transformation. We're still below in this vicious cycle between environmental destruction and conflict, and should move away from the environmental destruction to sustainable development, and from instability and war to peace and security, which again could be fostering each other. This is the fate the world is facing, but every individual and every group and every nation is facing the same challenge and the same choice. And so everybody can contribute to this, I think. And the question is, are we acting together or acting against each other? This is the current challenge. And I'm at the end of my presentation, and thank you very much for your attention.
Juergen, it's a wonderful talk with so much information and and perspective about what's going on. And so I will hold off to my questions. If we have questions, we have one question so far. So why don't we go to that, and then if there are no more, then I can ask a couple questions.
Subrata, it's not so much a question, but a comment. And
Okay.
someone is suggesting taking a look at a book called A God That Could Be Real.
Okay. Juergen, you have any comment? Are you familiar with the book?
No, I have not seen this book, but thank you for this information.
So, Juergen, what's couple of questions. First, an observation: how you ended the talk. That really we have to fight this situation with the climate together as a community, whole one community of the world, because this is something. Climate is not going to discriminate between advanced countries and less advanced countries. So I think that is the nub of the question, especially given the situation in the United States. And it's and we are hoping, and you were speaking on a historic day. We are hoping tomorrow we will have a different world, but we don't know. And because here we have a serious issue of denial of science and scientific analyses and so forth, and U.S. withdrawal from the uh, Conference of Parties and the United Nations and on climate change. So this is a how we work together. I think is the real question, because there is a conflict. I think, and you can comment on it. Is that even aside from the peculiar situation in the United States, which fortunately is not duplicated elsewhere, we have a serious issue of energy and development with relate to the global north and the global south, and and how do we mitigate that problem to attack? Because blaming China or blaming India is not going to, they want development as well. So if you want to comment on that as one issue, and the other is the accuracy of these models, as you had indicated in one of your charts, that the findings about the impact of the climate change for more recent events and so forth are more contested than the long range forecast. Are these a near term forecast improving all the time as you all are working on it? So those are my two things.
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's all about learning. We can learn by making projections about the future and avoid the problems, or we can learn by disaster. If you don't respond in time, if you don't try to avoid the problems, then the problems will reach us. So today maybe, or today is a historical day. I would not expect whatever the outcome is that the world will change in one day. It could be only the start for the better or for the worse. I think that's what would put it this way. And regarding the North-South relationship, I think the South is developing anyway. And, the question is only whether it's against the North or with the North. If it's against the North, then it's a more conflict situation. And the most pronounced conflict is that between the United States and China. And I think it wouldn't help anybody if you run into a violent conflict situation between these two major powers. I think China is strongly investing into renewable energy. So China is on a track in this field. You can say that's more solution-oriented than in the United States. In the United States, it's mostly the government in Washington that's blocking the process. But in other parts of the country, there is also renewable energy development. So this transition is going on anyway. If you look at what some states in the US are doing, simply also by technology and by economic reasons. So in the long run, I think politics cannot prevent it. Whoever is president in the United States, there are some developments going on anyway, whoever is sitting in the White House. The question is only whether we run into another disaster. If the White House is very strong, of course, very powerful, and can do many bad things using this power within the US and in the international context. I think we hope, at least I hope, that the democracy is not at stake in your country, and that the people make the right choices. But we'll see. Was there anything else you wanted to ask?
About the accuracy of the short-term predictions and the long-term predictions?
In terms of emissions?
Yeah, I mean, more, I think, impacts, because I just recall one of the charts where you mentioned that the recent events, the results are more contested. So.
You mean the climate conflict linkages? Yes, in correct. The past? Yeah. I think we had about 1 degree temperature change, temperature-wise, in the last century or so. And according to the expert view, it may have had already some impact, on the average 5%, but we talk about 2 to 4 or 5 degrees. And then you can say that there is very likely a strong impact on armed conflict. In particular, if the armed conflict undermines political solutions. The study that I mentioned says, in principle, the armed conflict from climate change can be contained if the right policy choices are made. Even then, but you must make these policy choices which are solution-oriented. And if the crisis world prevents these reasonable policy choices, then we cannot contain the risk anymore. It's getting out of control.
Yes. Thank you. I think I will turn it over to Trish. There are questions.
There are. Richard is asking, what do you think is the risk of nuclear war over lack of water? For instance, between India and Pakistan or in the Middle East?
Yeah, you put the highest possible risk, which is nuclear war. I mean, there is already a very strong conflict between India and Pakistan. And they have many reasons for conflict, which are deeply rooted in history, in religion, in economic dimensions, and climate change can be a further contributing factor to this decline. It can start as a conventional war, and the situation can end up in a nuclear war between both countries. The question is, of course, is water strong enough to be a factor for nuclear war? I think water alone, probably not. But water and climate and economics and religion together with other factors, they could become a trigger of an escalation ladder, I would say. You wouldn't start with a nuclear war, but the end, it may be ending with a nuclear war.
Richard is also asking, where do you see nuclear power fitting into the solutions? Is it too costly? Is it not fast enough to bring about change such as other renewable energy sources?
Yeah, nuclear energy is described as a low carbon energy source, and actually it's lower than fossil, coal in particular. It's, however, costly still, and it has other risks. You have the risk of accident, you have the risk of the whole life cycle of radioactive materials that you're transporting, you have the accidental risk of nuclear energy, and you have the final disposal question of nuclear energy, which is not solved. Final disposal. So you're replacing one problem with the other. It's now a subject of an assessment which problem is more relevant. Is it climate change or is it a nuclear risk? I didn't even mention the possibility of nuclear war as a result of nuclear energy, because you're producing plutonium and giving more countries access to plutonium, and then you may even increase the risk of nuclear war that we just discussed. So it may be a contribution, but it's very expensive, in particular if renewables are becoming cheaper and more competitive. It takes a long time to build a nuclear reactor, make it safe.
Thank you. There's a more philosophical question and a comment of the nature of many leaders around the world, and also titans of industry, that with a brain that drives them to more power and to plunder the earth, since they and their followers, quote, deserve, unquote, even more wealth.
Yeah, you raise a very deep question. This is something that's associated with human development and the accumulation of power, accumulation of capital, and accumulation of violent force. And these often go hand in hand. And we have this, it's related to exponential growth. Those who are more powerful use their power to get more power. Those who have a lot of capital use it to get more capital, and so on. So in the end, you have this enormous concentration process in our economy. And this is aggravated by globalization because it favors the strong compared to the weak. So it increases imbalance. And if you don't find a solution to this problem, then we cannot solve the other problems as well. Because you put everything in the hand of one person, like the American president now, he is accumulated economic power in his life and political power at the same time. And he can use it for his own interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
There are no more questions at this time.
Juergen, so since we have a little more time, perhaps it's interesting what you said about the situation in Germany, because I was of the opinion that during this transition, and maybe I missed it from your charts, that the emissions were actually going up, and that Germany, because it shut down most of the nuclear plants, that it had to buy power from France, which is almost 100% nuclear, and also that there is a lot more reliance on the coal from the Ruhrgebiet or wherever. So is this now, from your presentation, what I recall, things are better, not worse?
Yeah, if I showed you the long-term trends in terms of economic growth and decline of emissions. There are some temporary fluctuations. For instance, when you shut down a nuclear power plant, either you can replace it by coal or you buy nuclear energy, electricity from other countries. This is actually what Germany has also been done. But they also declared they want to get rid of all nuclear, of all coal power plants within the next 15 years or so, in addition to getting rid of all nuclear power. And this means in the end, only renewable energy sources are left for Germany. It's not fast enough. Many, like Fridays for Future, also argue Germany could do more. It could have put a higher carbon price, for instance, and there's a lot of debate which carbon price can the German economy digest. But for experts and the movement, it's not fast enough what Germany is doing, but maybe better than other countries.
But the industrial houses were complaining that the cost of electricity was going up in Germany quite a bit.
Yeah, the cost of electricity is important for the economy, but still it has not destroyed the German economy, I would say.
Yeah.
It's not the German. The industry always complains about cost.
Well, this is the main argument we have in this country, even before Trump. I mean, Joe Biden was asked repeatedly, "Do you support fracking?" And he says he's in support of the fracking because large number of people within the Democratic Party are against fracking for gas. So, and then of course Donald Trump always talking about the jobs on the fossil fuel industry, because he was trying to brand Biden as being shutting down or the Chevron facilities in Houston or something like that. So here we have a much organized lobby. I mean, Trump is kind of the perfect storm against science and everything, but even without him, there are just normal people. There is a strong opposition to uh, bringing in renewables.
Yes, I mean fracking has external costs, and it's polluting the environment. It's having some risks of underground pollution, maybe even earthquake risk, and the water is polluted through fracking. But this is externalized to people who suffer from it. It's not a part of the fracking price. And if you would have a fair inclusion of these external costs into the fracking price, then fracking would not be as cheap as it currently is. And actually, I think over time, the fracking costs maybe also for economic reasons increase, because they got the easy uses of oil and gas in the United States spent down, like for traditional oil and gas sources are also spent down over time. So you more and more move to the risky and costly uses of fossil energy sources.
It's very similar to the nuclear power. I mean, when nuclear power was coming up in the 60s, it was famously said that nuclear power is too cheap to meter. It was almost zero cost once the plant is built. But as we know, and as you correctly point out, there are so many other external costs that are not taken into account into the pricing.
Yes, nuclear energy is also an extractive industry. It's extracting a non-renewable energy source, like oil and gas. So over time, the cost and the risk is also increasing and are externalized. Like any nuclear reactor accident, be it Chernobyl or Fukushima, is externalizing the risk to others. Others have the health risk, have to pay for the reduction of the risk, and so on. So, if you put a fair price on nuclear energy over the whole life cycle of nuclear power, then nuclear power becomes even more expensive.
Thank you. I think we have questions now.
We do. Richard's asking, what is the best way to change human behavior? Carbon tax, for instance?
The best is people are educated to see the benefits of what they do, not only the disadvantages. Of course, every change of behavior means you have to move away from something you learned, from your traditions, and so on. But people must recognize the benefit, and here education is very important. Science is part of this to understand better what the consequences of your behavior are. Then people have a better incentive to make the changes. They may need maybe some nudging or some triggering by governments. Say we increase through regulations. They say you should not do this or that, or we make this or that option cheaper and the other one more expensive. That is also becoming an incentive for people. People resist if the change is too big, if the cost is too high for the change, but in the end they're convinced, because we have many regulations, we have many laws. Nobody would say, I want to have the freedom of kill people. We have given up this right hundreds of years ago. Should not be allowed. But the same as you should not have the right to pollute the environment. You should not have the right to pollute the climate. But it's a learning effect. It takes time that people understand. The young generation is further ahead maybe than the old generation.
Robin is again asking a more philosophical question again about human behavior, that it seems as though the narcissistic personalities, the power-hungry personalities, rise to the top of government and business and feel justified in their plundering. Is there a way to mitigate that, perhaps genetic drive?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it genetic reasons. It's just a matter of facts that the powerful have more influence, so they can better pursue their interest because of the power they have. So if you have a society that selects powerful, those who aim for power, then of course you get more people on top that have power. It's a selective mechanism. What a successful society is, and how people are selected to become into power. Is it those who only pursue their self-interest, or is it people who only want to have the commons in mind?
And there is a comment that over 75% of laws in the US are drafted by corporate institutions or interests. And until that changes, our policies will always serve them and not citizens.
That's right. I mean, it's a matter of democracy. And there are different types of democracy. I know that America is proud of its democracy, but it's now several hundred years old. It was very advanced in the beginning, ahead of others, but others came later and had also adapted their democratic rules to new situations. I think the United States should maybe also think about adapting their principles of democracy, their voting rights, and so on, to the new situation of the world we are currently in. And it's not longer the United States alone. And even the superpower status of the United States is increasingly challenged. So are the democratic voting rights and the participatory elements in the US democracy still appropriate for the new world?
Very good. Yeah.
Juergen, you touched upon geoengineering as one of the ways to mitigate climate change. And Richard is asking, will science save us? What about putting carbon into the ground or using bitumen in other ways than burning it?
Science alone cannot save us. so only science that's embedded into society has a chance. It must be accepted and adapted by the people. We cannot hope that science solves the problems that are created by politics. We had this idea, scientists save the world already in the 1980s with the idea of the so-called Star Wars SDI concept. There was a very dangerous situation in terms of the arms race in the Cold War, and President Reagan suggested that scientists should develop a shield to protect the US against the nuclear attack. And many arguments were made that scientists alone cannot do it. It does not work. As long as you have tens of thousands of nuclear weapons, it's not possible, it's not feasible. Then and today. In the same way, I would doubt that scientists can save the world from billions of tons of carbon emissions. It's simply too big, the task is too big. It can only work as part of a, say, disarmament process in terms of nuclear weapons, and in terms of a emission reduction process, severe emission reduction process, then some sort of carbon extraction from the atmosphere may work.
Thank you. Robin is recommending a book that is called Why We Elect Narcissists and Sociopaths and How We Can Stop.
This is not a question, right?
Right, exactly. A suggestion.
Okay, yes. I could give a comment, but maybe it's not necessary. I think some see politics as entertainment and do not recognize that it affects their lives severely.
Are there any other questions? Juergen, no. I was going to say about this whole business of democracy and the international cooperation, that my feeling is that in the United States, we have a situation that has been developing for a long time, which is this anything to do with international efforts, whether it is climate change or the pandemic or the World Health Organization or the UNESCO, all these United Nations organizations, that the United States always feel, and they have now convinced the media about the inefficient bureaucracy of the United Nations, that they're not going to dictate to us what we do. But without an accepted international framework, like we know on the climate process, that it's not going to be possible to attack these challenges. And I think that Europe really, given the seriousness of the crisis and the problems we face, should take a more sort of active role in generating world public opinion and so forth, and not play always a second fiddle to the United States.
Yeah, after World War II, the United States was a leading power in establishing the United Nations system, because it was recognized that a world united in terms of nation states could be also for the benefit of the United States. And this is based on the example of World War II. The World War II, the fascist movement in Germany and elsewhere, became a threat, a major threat to the United States. So this forced the recognition that we better try to prevent this together with other nations rather than against other nations. And it's always a two-way relationship. If the US feels that the United Nations is affecting their politics in a negative way, the United States can also get benefit from what happens in the world and influence it and become a leading power into the positive direction, into the transformation direction, which is probably reducing the threat for the US as well. If we move into a disaster world, I doubt that this is in the interest of the United States, because of everything is connected with each other.
Thank you very much. That's a great answer. Okay. I think we have one more question, and then we'll see.
Yes. What is the comparison of what individuals can do? For instance, becoming vegetarian, biking instead of driving, versus changes in large sectors of our society, such as the military, which is a leading cause of greenhouse gases.
Individual, you mean individual citizens?
Yes.
People are the ultimate power in the world. What people are doing, I mean, in many ways, what we as individual citizens do is affecting politics. We are voting for political actors in the democracy, and we are also take part in the consumption. Every citizen selects what we buy. So this is our one part of our power, and the third is in the production cycle we are part as workers. So in three ways, the individuals have multiple roles to play here, and they are the ultimate source of power in the world is the people. And it's only that maybe some people, like politicians or companies, they extract a part of their power for their own interest, because the people have maybe incomplete understanding of what their real power is. So just to say again, it's ultimately our decisions that shape the world of the individuals, and in certain ways we should not stay as individuals but organize themselves to become more powerful.
Would you say then the biggest impact would be as individuals to come together as large collective to create change and not put the onus on individual people personally?
Yes, we have to overcome the individualization of our societies, and have better ways of coming together. This is the reason why you see an increase of protest movement in the world, that people think they're sitting alone in their home is not very satisfactory, and they're all suffering from the problem. So they have to go together, either going into streets or in clubs or in other type of organizations to work together.
Thank you.
So if we are coming close to our end of our session. So I will let Trish, of course, have the last word. But before that, I want to thank you again, Juergen. I think this has been one of the best seminars in our series so far. Not only the presentation of the material and your answers, thoughtful answers to questions and comments, have been really valuable, and these of course is going to be on our website, so people who missed it should really see it. So as the co-chair of INES, I feel very proud. Thank you very much, my dear friend Juergen. Over
Thank
to
you to you for organizing this whole series.
Yes, we're very grateful. Thank you. And thank you for balancing the program with very hard facts, very difficult facts to take in, but also a sense of hope and that we can change this. So thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
So good luck with the rest of the series.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Bye-bye.
Bye.